Beware of he who advises a course of action in which he himself takes no risk. Technology should be invisible to the user. When you use your phone, you don't see all the hard work that's gone into making that app beautiful, or even your phone being the most powerful thing you carry around in your pocket. Absolutely. Right? We should do that for our clients in our sector.
What would you say to the owner or the managing director of a trust company that still sees technology as a bit of an overhead, perhaps, not a differentiator?
I don't see how in 5 years' time, certainly not 10 years' time, a SME trust company can provide the services, evidence their compliance to the myriad of regulatory needs, and manage their costs without technology, data, and automation. So if you're not going to go on that journey, sell.
Bold, strong, love it. That's great.
We need to provide value to customers way more quickly. Yeah, the days of a 3-year transformation program, in my opinion, are dead.
Everyone, welcome to the Optifi podcast, Opticast. I'm Alain Egre. I'm the COO and co-founder here at Optifi. And if this is your first time tuning in, we use this space to go deep on what's really happening in the trust and corporate services industry. No jargon, no fluff, just honest conversations with people building the future, right? So today's episode is about the challenges in the trust industry. And we're keen to sort of go a little bit deeper on how new thinking and new tools can be applied to enable companies to meet those challenges effectively. I'm joined by Stuart Richford, our CEO here at Optifi. Stuart, welcome to Opticast. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Al. Great to be working with you.
So Stu, look, let's kick off with something simple. For those who don't know us yet, tell us a little bit more about Optifi.
So we want to be the F&Z of the trust and corporate services and family office sector. So to launch with, we've launched 3 services. We've launched a fully managed service for a family office. So all the tech, all the ops, all the IT, all the systems to enable a ultra high net worth to run their wealth. The second product is aimed at the trust and corporate services sector. So digitizing every business process and consolidating that into a single pane of glass. So everything managed, controlled, digitized in one place. And of course, given our background, we obviously consult around these services too.
So no, quite right. Really good to hear your insight on that. So what I'd love to hear, if you're comfortable, it sounds a little bit more interesting fact about your career. Help us get to know you.
So an interesting fact. There's one. I can't delve too deep into it, but as a consultant running a department recovery project, I accidentally uncovered one of the biggest frauds in Channel Island history.
Can you tell me more?
Not here.
Great. One absolutely for another day. Okay,
yeah.
Well, we'll pull that one over a beer and not so much coffee. Well, look, building on that a little bit, then pull the thread. What's the most exciting project you're working on right now?
So Optifi is a young business, so we're working on completing our version 1 of the product. So we're past MVP. So that's the container to manage all the workflows, all the approval processes across an entire organization. So, but importantly now we're building out our digital controls, integrating KPIs, SLAs, and building now the first version of our AI agents to basically support the operational activity. For me, it's basically how do we design and implement 20, 30 years of experience.
Fantastic. That's really, again, genuinely very insightful. And again, what I'd love to hear, and for our listeners to hear a little bit more, to wrap that up, what do you feel, can you articulate what Optifi's bigger vision is?
So our goal in time is to become the first platform as a service provider to the trust and corporate services and family office sectors. So again, that's all the middle and back office technology and services and systems to enable a trustee to be an amazing trustee, but let us do the stuff we're good at, the IT, the systems, the ops.
And just make it work, right? It's
Absolutely.
2025, it just needs to work.
Trustees are great trustees. They're not technologists. Let the techies do the tech. Let the trustees be trustees.
Beautifully articulated. And I think we do really resonate with that tagline, absolutely. So let's set the stage for some of the things that we wanted to talk about today, and help sort of naturally share with the industry. So if you could tell me from your perspective, how would you describe the current position of the trust and corporate services industry as a whole?
Okay, again, to give that context, let's take a step back. So if you go back 20, 25 years ago, the trust sector was protected by specialist knowledge, specialist legislation, and relatively benign regulations, right? So 15 years ago, 20 years ago, the trust industry had very high margins. We're talking 75, 80% gross margin. Today, that gross margin is down to 30, 35%. EBITDA is down in the teens or low 20s. And obviously, through our work as consultants, we know that there's some companies that, were much lower than that. So what we see, we have a industry under financial pressure for the first time in its existence. We have high and increasing costs and increasing complexity of meeting regulations. And we have an industry, because of the previous great conditions, that's relatively underinvested in technology. So from my opinion, that's an industry ripe for change, and an industry that's under material pressure. So we need new thinking, new ways of working.
Fantastic. So what I'd love to hear a little bit deeper, if you're comfortable pulling the thread on, is how you'd perhaps characterize some of that financial pressure. Perhaps use an example of
So obviously without names, but let's take a typical 60, 70 FTE, small, medium trust company. They're going to be around, let's say, £10 million in revenue, to keep the math simple. And if we take a very recent example, their recovery rate, so that's the ability to convert revenue to cash, being down at around 86%.
Okay.
So with a £10 million company, that's a £1.4 million business case or opportunity that their clients, or £1.4 million opportunity to create revenue, but the recovery issues are there because their clients are basically pushing back on their fees across the board.
But there's an opportunity to take that time and bring it into something that's valuable. So to take that a little bit further then, where do you feel that hidden margin leakage, where that sort of wastage is actually happening? Is there?
So there's no magic bullet. The challenge is that we have one of quite serious complexity. So we've done quite a lot of commercial recovery work as consultants. So the financial analysis to understand the problem, and then the programs of change in order to rectify the problems. So we typically find issues of underperforming clients, so low client profitability and highly variable client profitability. We see over-servicing, we see time dumping onto fixed fee clients, we see broken fee lines. So WIP that's building up that has never ever and will never be built until we came in. And again, so when we look at that, you look at the recovery rates, you look at the EBITDA rates, a particular project we did a few years back, by systematically going through the financials, by systematically going through a program of change to rectify that, we helped a client pick up around 15 basis points of EBITDA. That took them in 18 months from being the worst performing business unit in the group to the best performing business unit in the group.
It's incredible what focus on that particular area can really do, and how that can fundamentally make a difference. So do you feel then there's any adjacency with, sort of other sectors and markets, perhaps one that you're quite familiar with in your background?
So the trust industry is moving away from time-based fees. It's happening, moving more towards fixed fees, moving more and more towards activity-based fees. And obviously that's having a corresponding impact on the rest of the sector. So let's take consultancy. We are ex-consultants, right? So clients are moving away from fees, time-based fees. So they don't want their consultants to be on big day rates, advising a course of action in which the consultant themselves takes no risk. So if we flip that and look at the historic model of consultancy, we want you to pay a lot of money to go on a course of action that I'm recommending, but I'm not going to take any risk in that, right? That's not an attractive proposition. So we need to change that model.
That's really interesting, actually. And if you think about changing that model and then bringing that round to the thinking that we, around Optifi, the products, the technology that we're building, and how we want to take that into the market, how has that really shaped?
So there's a beautiful.
How could you articulate that?
So there's a beautiful quote, and I love quotes, but it's along the lines of, "Beware of he who advises a course of action in which he himself takes no risk." Right? So at Optifi, we are experts in delivering transformative tech-enabled change. I've been delivering tech-enabled change for 30 years. Back in the days of early STP, dial-up banking, internet banking, treasury and FX automation. And that was before I moved into the trust industry 20 years ago.
And I've got 5 years left for those that want to do the maths.
Absolutely. So our clients are trustees. They're excellent trustees. They built businesses delivering wonderful services to their clients. But by the definition, that means they're not necessarily expert change managers. So as expert change managers and technologists, let's take the risk of execution off our clients and put it where it should be on Optifi.
With technology.
Absolutely.
And with, ultimately outsourced operation. Okay. Well, look, that's something which obviously carries an element of inherent risk. You talked about sort of earlier about capturing that kind of that risk. That's something that needs to be baked into, how we work and operate. What are some of the things that we're putting in place, or you feel are necessary actually to put in place to be able to address that and mitigate that risk?
So a lot of people talk about investing in client success. And I think it's important that we start walking the talk, right? So if you look at the way we have, we're delivering value to our first clients. There was no upfront investment. Our clients are only paying when we meet milestones that we committed to. Now, of course, we're a young business, and we have to do some of those things to mitigate our clients' risk in us. At the same time, those principles are very, very much here to stay, because let's take away the pain of our clients buying our services. Let's take away the massive upfront investment cost in change delivery. Let's take the delivery risk onto ourselves, and let's prove that we can deliver value. Now, on the flip side, I'm a commercial guy too, right? So for that, we'll provide a product and the support services that delivers demonstrable value, but in return, I want a subscription-like ARR fee linked to the value we're delivering to you.
Perfect. So I'm going to take you on a slightly different track, but very much aligned actually, which is the concept of regulation, so prevalent in our industry, and we hear about the cost of that a lot. We hear about the challenges. Could you perhaps sort of delve into a little bit more why this is perhaps an acute challenge in the sector or opportunity?
Yeah, so let's for context then, let's just set the scene. The trust sector is characterized by having operational teams in geographically dispersed subscale markets.
Yeah.
Pardon me. So let's think it's Jersey, it's BVI, it's Luxembourg, it's Hong Kong, it's Cayman, it's Mauritius, right? So that's an extraordinarily complex web, overlapping web of regulatory requirements, with each of those regulators adding regulations each year. Yeah. It's an extraordinary, an exponential challenge that the industry faces.
And recently, of course, across the offshore market, we've had the money valve visit across those recent islands. Do you feel that's sort of shaping things? Is there things that come out of that journey?
So the offshore world's going through structural change, right? And we can see the rhetoric from our own regulator and other global regulators that it's no longer sufficient just to have your policies and procedures in place. The regulatory approach has and is changing. Tomorrow, a trustee is going to have to prove to the regulator precisely why a decision was taken at the precise point in time. And without hunting in files, without hunting through a myriad of different systems. Why did you do that 3 years ago, Stuart? Yeah. So how do we enable our clients to have a defensible risk and compliance framework that evidences the decisions made in a relentlessly precise manner that is defensible not only to the regulator but a client and even potentially a judge?
Agreed. I mean, it's going to be critically important, right? And it should be a fundamental of any sort of technology service or capability that sits in the market. And specifically then, do you feel how that shaped what we're building?
Yes. So it's an extraordinary challenge and we need new thinking and new ways of working. So for me, this highlights the importance of data and it highlights the importance of evidencing compliance. So the transparency in operational processes and decision making. Again, preemptively enabling a trust company to defend itself and its decisions in the future. So at Optifi, we are linking policies and procedures, and we are digitalizing every process to make sure it complies to that procedure, right? And then if you take it one step further, because we've digitized every process, we can assign a service level, a KPI, a traction scorecard. We can integrate to the underlying systems, and with structured, controlled, trusted data, you can then start applying, AI agents and doing some wonderfully crazy fun things.
Indeed. If you start exploring the art of the possible, do you feel there's an opportunity, or perhaps I feel there's an opportunity to remove something like time recording in the future? Still,
all of it.
Don't need to answer. That's fine. So, but it's definitely that, there's an opportunity to really drive something different. So I'd love to go into something a little bit more that you touched on earlier around change adoption, tech adoption that we're seeing in the industry. So could you perhaps explore a little bit where you feel the average trust company has an opportunity to do tech adoption better?
Yeah. So again, to set the scene, let's take a quick step back and, why are we here? So again, historically, the sector experienced very high margins. So quite simply, they didn't need to invest in technology in order to make some seriously good money. In actual fact, you'd almost argue that the opposite was true. With a time charge model, there's a curious incentive to be inefficient. Yeah, we called that out in Trustco sector. We called that out in the consultancy sector. You can make good money by being not very good at your job, and that has to change.
Yeah.
So, but today the trust sector's under margin, service, regulatory pressure. So those highly manual time charge models are becoming less and less viable. And we know that because, as we said earlier, the industry's moving more and more and more to fixed fees, to annual fees, to activity-based costs. So I think that's certainly one of the key trends. The second area, just to touch on, is we must acknowledge the impact of private equity-led consolidation in our market.
Yeah.
A private equity company has a 4-year time horizon, take off the 18 months for the clean runoff to get the valuation high. All of a sudden, you've now got a 2-year window to complete a 4 or 5-year transformation program. That's outside a private equity company's time horizon. They're not going to invest to give the next person the value. So we have to acknowledge that constraint, and we have to deliver value faster, quicker, and more reliably.
I love what you're saying there. And let's tackle that first one. So cost to serve. What are our opportunities within the industry to reduce, or at least articulate and understand and, manage that cost to serve metrics?
So let's take a large trust company. They have a myriad of systems. They will be on a trust administration system. Due to the private equity-led consolidation and the general and underinvestment in IT, many of these businesses are on many different trust admin systems, and indeed many instances of the same trust administration system. And then you add in CRM, document management, payment gateways. So to get a process within a trust company to go end to end with all of these vertically aligned systems, just to do a payment, you have to go into 5 different systems. And then you have to go onto the bank system. Yeah. That's extraordinarily cumbersome and expensive.
Which anecdotally, when you play that back to, actual chargeable time, can be genuinely quite material cost.
It could be huge.
We see
a recent study was £150 just for the payment. That's not including the distribution work to enable the payment to be made. So at Optifi, we are enabling clients to reduce their cost to serve. We are getting all of those business processes into one place so that you don't have to look in 7 different systems to find where something is. You look in one, and we manage the integration to the underlying systems. Many of our clients are already managing their data integration to the systems. What we're doing is building on top of their investment. So we reduce the friction, we reduce the management cost, and we increase the transparency.
Genuinely very insightful, and it just feels like it makes such perfect sense. So let's tackle the second one, right? And pick up on the second point you raised around revenue. So if we delve into that a little bit, how can we help clients, or how can trust companies explore those opportunities to drive, better revenue and support their ownership structure?
So I think there's probably 2 things to raise. The first one is relatively straightforward. Reduce the friction, reduce the time spent, and therefore enable clients to spend more time with their clients. Yeah, spending time with clients is a leading indicator of future revenue performance. Yeah, subject to obviously contracting and capturing the value. But also by reducing the friction, consolidating everything into one place, we can help clients create new revenue streams. I go back to my time in banking, working in treasury and FX and things. With good data, with trusted processes, all of a sudden, banking integration, FX integration, treasury integration becomes very viable. And that's just one example of several that we're helping our clients to explore about how they add new services to create new revenue streams.
That's That's clear, and I imagine that's going to influence the commercial model, the return on investment that's so important that we've explored previously, and making sure that that's clear, articulated through those metrics, and that people can translate that to their own business as well.
Yeah.
And then actually, just sort of finally on this particular topic and moving you through, keeping in mind some of the PE in the industry, as well as obviously some of the alternative ownership structures. How do you feel we can, or the industry can, make the most of, or align most to that?
So let's acknowledge the nature of PE. We touched on this before. We need to provide value to customers way more quickly. Yeah, the days of a 3-year transformation program, in my opinion, are dead. So how does Optify commoditize 15, 20 years of delivering tech-enabled change so that we can deliver a product next week that adds value in weeks, not months and years? Yeah, because it takes quite a while for the client to go through the change process, speaking to every client, to reintroduce a new service, to capture the change. So we need to shorten our time horizon to today, as far as we can, to an extraordinarily short number of time, to give the client time to do the business changes that will actually enable them to capture the value.
Indeed, it's that instant SaaS-based culture that we all see on our phones, right? When you download something, it needs to work, and you want that instant benefit. Okay, great. I'd love to ask a slightly different question. I'm quite intrigued for. So, what would you say to the owner or the managing director of a trust company that still sees technology as a bit of an overhead, perhaps not a differentiator? Is there anything you tell them? What would you tell them?
So I'm hoping I don't get in trouble for this, but sell. Simple as that, sell. I don't see how in 5 years' time, certainly not 10 years' time, a SME trust company can provide the services, evidence their compliance to the myriad of regulatory needs, and manage their costs without technology, data, and automation. So if you're not going to go on that journey, sell.
Bold, strong, love it. That's great. So I'm just building on that slightly though. When you think about the industry a little bit wider, do you feel that there's still consolidation in the market? Is that inevitable, or do you think there's room for independence in the industry?
I'm going to be cheeky and say yes to both of those questions. They seem like they're diametrically opposed, but I don't think they are. So first off, PE-led consolidation isn't going away. It is a way of building and unlocking value.
Absolutely.
And it's here to stay. The other bit is about the independence. So as we go forward, with AI, in a world of disinformation, what is the one thing that doesn't change? In actual fact, I believe it'll become increasingly important, and that's our intrinsic need for human connection and trust in those relationships.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, and it's lovely to hear that from what you're saying there. So how about we take a dive into something that's genuinely super topical? There's a lot of buzzwords around it and its application to the industry. So perhaps quite keen to talk about AI and the data that kind of surrounds that. Everyone is talking about it, but I'd love to sort of hear what your perspective on what the story is in the real world. We know that GPT, for example, has been around for a good few years. And maybe for some people, life hasn't changed much. Perhaps there's some productivity that's being built in the market. Perhaps there's areas. Love to get your perspective generally on where you think that's applicable to the trust and corporate services industry and, the opportunity.
So there is a A lot of hype around AI.
Yeah.
Let's acknowledge that. And there are not enough use cases right now, particularly in our industry, of where AI is being used to add value. However, if we look at any industrial revolution, or any revolution of that sort of type, I believe AI, and I believe we're now seeing AI both destroy and create value in different areas. So automation will expose inefficiencies and inaccuracies in our data. You can't automate a mess. And it will commoditize low value tasks. And when I say low value tasks, I don't mean things that are difficult to do. I mean things that the client doesn't value.
Yeah.
Getting a payment out the door in today's world, when I've just paid for a cup of coffee with my phone, shouldn't cost me £150. Okay.
That's good. So there is an incredible, you're right, there is incredible, and I actually feel really guilty myself talking about it, even in this mode and capacity, because there's every event I go to is trying to tackle this topic and provide insight and give some sort of, extra strength to it, because there is an opportunity, right?
Yes.
There is such an opportunity. When you think about, that art of the possible and what's out there, I'm sure people are coming up with amazing use cases every day, right? So what I'd be keen to just explore with you a little bit deeper as well. Do you think, thinking wider, thinking more macro, has this kind of paradigm shift happened before?
Yeah, so I think it's now evident fact that the industry is in the middle of a paradigm shift, or the early stages of a paradigm shift. Historically, things that used to be hard and expensive to do is now relatively cheap. Take some of our examples, right? Computer coding. We're prototyping computer code screen designs in hours and days, not weeks and months.
I know. How cool is that? Honestly, right. Exploring that is just...
It's mind-blowing. And don't get me wrong, we then hand off the work to a team of very, very extraordinarily talented developers and engineers, right? But we can prototype, show our client a working prototype later this afternoon, get their approval, and then put it into dev. That's extraordinary. Let's look at high quality design content. Again, there is an enormous value by engaging talented designers, marketers, things like that. People still add an awful lot of value. At the same time, again, I can create images on my phone in seconds.
Yeah.
I can play around with the designs. I can rapidly test them in a marketplace, again, later on today. That allows us to deliver in weeks what would have taken months and hundreds of thousands of pounds to do historically.
And indeed, and that art of interacting, listening, showcasing, and hearing the voice of the client is something we'll delve into in a later podcast. Absolutely. Yeah. So there is relevancy with, and then, sorry, just delve into that. Another point I'd quite like to hear your voice on is, you've seen this happen elsewhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, let's take a macro view and then let's dive into that in detail. So history is full of paradigm shifts. The printing press democratized, access to content.
Indeed.
And education exploded as people could actually read the Bible and knew what it said. The first industrial revolution moved power away from landowners to, I guess, the factory owners. Calculators removed the need for slide rules. Netflix smashed Blockbuster, mobile phones, Spotify, Amazon. There's hundreds and hundreds of examples, right? For me, AI is just the next one. So you can't change it. You can't push the water back up the hill. So get on the bus.
So help me bring that back to how that is impacting, the trusted corporate trust companies and sectors. Where do they need to invest today?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So the barriers to entry that used to exist are coming down.
Yeah.
Democratizing access to specialist knowledge. As a simple example, the ability to rapidly prototype and deliver services. So I believe trust companies, and we need to add, really, really introspectively look at where we actually add value, real value. So again, just because something's difficult doesn't necessarily mean it's valuable to a client, right? So in an AI world, we need to invest in meaningful, trusted relationships with our client, right? We're dealing with people's wealth, right? That's an extraordinarily emotional subject. So work with your clients and build the trust. If they trust you and the price is reasonable, they're not going to move, right?
Makes perfect sense.
Let's create and invest in proprietary data that already exist, albeit scattered around your organization, so to drive insight. Real insight into the services customers value, want, and need. Let's use that to create intellectual property, ways of delivering services or services that other people can't easily copy. And let's acknowledge the fact that in order to deliver that, we're going to have to build partnerships. We can't do it all ourselves. We don't even do it all ourselves.
No, absolutely, indeed. And something you touched on earlier that I think would be really interesting, again, to hear your voice on, is you mentioned that, if you're in that world of AI, data is critical, right? To, you can't automate something if the data is not working, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit more about that, for a second. Why is it powerful? What's important?
So I'm going to answer that two ways. So again, a really cool quote, I think it was Peter Drucker. There is nothing so useless as doing efficiently that which should not be done at all. So let's take a step back and let's only actually try and apply automation and AI to things that add value, right? And there's a lot of hubris out in the market. But at its core, data becomes very, very powerful when it's structured, auditable, trusted, and importantly, tied to business outcomes. Okay, so KPIs, controls, workflows are all built from a data first perspective. If you don't trust your data, you won't trust the control that's based on that data. It's simple as that.
That's great. That makes perfect sense, right? And I'd also love to hear from you, if you think about AI and to make it practical, perhaps for some of our listeners, is there any sort of one or two AI use cases that you think most impacts and give value and ROI for our TCSPs?
Yeah, so again, I kind of almost want to go back to the top. I think consultants need to stop talking about AI adoption. Okay, so at Optifi, we are building AI agents into all of our products and services. Yeah, we are the technologists, you are the trustee. Yeah, so I want people, by taking on our service, to have automatically adopted AI because we've built it into our services. So I think the alternative of let's go around with a nice shiny PowerPoint helping people adopt AI, that sounds extraordinarily expensive and unlikely to deliver value, right? Simple fact. So let us put the AI into our tools. Technology should be invisible to the user. When you use your phone, you don't see all the hard work that's gone into making that app beautiful, or even your phone being the most powerful thing you carry around in your pocket. Absolutely. Right? we should do that for our clients in our sector.
More powerful than the thing that took astronauts to the moon. In,
Yes, exactly, with slide rules.
Slide rules 60 years ago, indeed. So you're quite right. And is there an AI theatre? Is there a kind of is there a problem? Where it might not add actual value? Do you feel?
So what's been interesting, and we worked with our previous employers, pioneering and really looking at some areas of AI adoption and use cases for AI. And some of the early things that AI did really, really well was, read the compliance manual, give you the answers, read the HR manuals, give you the answers you need, taking away that sort of friction in a simple process. The way I see AI going forward, if you take that to its next step, if you have all of your business processes in one place, all of your controls digitized, all of your data therefore trusted, you can then start doing some powerful things. And these are very human things, right? So imagine someone is sick, hey, Optifi, can you move all of Jane's work that's due today to David?
Cracking example, right?
Simple things.
It's simple things.
Yeah.
Just works.
Just
done.
And you didn't have to adopt AI. You just had to download the app.
That's good. That's great. And I think that wraps that up wonderfully well. It's a great analogy. So, Stuart, moving on, I'd love you to perhaps zoom out for us a little bit, back into that kind of macro space. Put yourself forward 5 years from now. Classic question. But what's the vision for the industry, and what's the vision for the technology that's out there that obviously people like us are building?
So again, let's look at what happened in the last 5 years of technology. I do think it's always dangerous drawing a straight line, but let's for the purpose of the tape, let's do that.
Indeed.
We see the incumbent providers, digitizing risk, KYC collection, books of record, accounting, entity management processes. Our clients are trying to integrate, consolidate, manage all of that. What they haven't done, except in one or two small exceptional cases, they haven't actually digitized the business process that goes across the top. So the reason why we're doing that first is, one, because it's hard, complex, and we think there's a gap in the market, but also because I think it enables us to do and go where we want to go next. If you draw a parallel to the investment industry, right?
Indeed.
Let's look at Brooks Macdonald. 10, 15 years ago, they had a front, middle, back office. Today, and they're an investment manager. Today, they are just an investment manager. They have a front office and they've outsourced everything else. And that's not just happened in investments, that's happened in wealth, that's happened in banking, that's happened in many, many other sectors. Why isn't that going to happen here? It hasn't happened here yet because geographically dispersed, subscale markets, and let's be honest, they were making too much money 10 years ago and the technology didn't really work yet. That's changed. Yeah, they're not making the money they were 10, 15 years ago, and the technology is now extraordinarily powerful, so we can tackle those problems. So I think we need to, so that in 5 years' time, we are and could be the F&Z of the trust and corporate services world. Why not?
So wonderful to hear your insights on that. And I genuinely really enjoyed, and I think that's, again, incredibly well articulated opportunity for the industry to move towards that, that next phase, that next level. So I think that's a perfect place to wrap up, today's episode. And Stuart, so humbly grateful for your time and sharing those insights. And for anyone listening, genuinely, if you're in the trust space and something here has kind of ultimately resonated or challenged you, we just love to hear from you, right? So please engage with us, come talk. You can catch us on our platform on our website, optifyplatform.com. And of course, you can connect with us directly on LinkedIn. So thank you, right? Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and thanks for listening.